Hi and welcome! Creating a text box that automatically scales to the size of its contents is super easy, so let's have a look at how to do it. The result will change its size in the direction you set and have a background image that scales in tandem with the text box's contents. Create an empty container on your canvas and add a Text Mesh Pro child element to it. We will add a background to this container once everything else is set up and working. The amount of text you initially fill it with hardly matters, but the more text you have, the more obvious your result will be. The first thing you'll notice once you enter enough text is that it begins to overflow the box it is supposed to be contained in. Click on the bar at the bottom of your inspector called Layout Properties. This box will tell you the width and height it would optimally like to be sized as. You can test this by entering the values manually into the rect transform. My box is initially sized 200 by 40 pixels. If I set the width to the layout's preferred width, the text box will resize so that all the text fits into it in just one line, which is typically not what we intend to happen. I'll go back instead. I'll add the preferred height to the rect transform. Now the box is tall enough to contain all the text, but if I were to change the width, the box of course keeps its height, leaving a lot of empty space. Also, this only changes the size of the text box, not the container. We can see the outline of the parent and none of our numbers match its size. We need to work with two of the layout system components in this case, the content size fitter and a layout group. For a simple box that only displays some text like this one, you can pick either the vertical or horizontal layout, it won't make a difference. I'm going with a vertical layout here, and you can see the text box instantly snapping into the top left corner of the container. I explained how layout groups, layout elements, and content size fitters work in detail in my previous tutorial and written guidebook, which I highly recommend you check after this one. But it would go way beyond the intended scope of this tutorial, so I'll focus only on the immediate basics here. For our settings, we need to toggle on the two first checkboxes of Control Child Size and only the width of Child Force Expand. And just in case you picked a horizontal layout group, you'd pick width here instead. This will now resize your text box container and you won't be able to change the numbers inside its rect transform anymore. However, if you are changing the size of the container now, the text box will resize in tandem, which is almost what we want, just the other way around. Also, our text can still overflow. Next, add a content size fitter to the container. At first, the two drop-downs default to unconstrained, which means it doesn't do anything yet, and you can still change the values of your box manually. You get 3 settings per drop-down: unconstrained, minimum size, and preferred size. And again, have a look at the layout properties box below. We have a minimum width and height of 0, and some higher numbers for the preferred width and height. All of them are derived from the infos the Text Mesh Pro component told the layout group about. You can check that by clicking on the Text Mesh Pro child element. Let's keep the horizontal fit to unconstrained because we really don't need all this text to be just in one line, but instead let's set the preferred value. The value is being grayed out, but this time the rect transform is being set to the height the text box needs. If you change its width, it resizes itself in accordance to its contents. Just in case your box is still taller than needed, which can happen very rarely, resize its width manually one time to trigger a recalculation. Now the height of our box will always fit the contents of the text box. And if you enjoyed the tutorial so far or learned something new, please give the video a like and subscribe. Commenting also helps a lot and I love reading from others. Okay, so this is fine, but let's see how we can control in which direction the box expands, since currently if we add or remove text from the box, it grows equally in the top and bottom direction. That can easily lead to a text sitting outside the canvas area or overlapping with elements it is not supposed to overlap with. We need to work with the box's pivot for this. Initially, it sits in the center of the box. It's the blue circle every UI element displays. You can see its position in the pivot entry of the rect transform as well. Once more, I'll change the amount of text in my box. It grows top to bottom. Now I will change the pivot to sit at the bottom of the box, and it grows only upwards. The opposite happens if I place it on the top. You can, of course, also set the pivot to a corner of your box if you want to set the width of your container by script and need it to only grow into the right or left direction. You can see that in action by holding Alt while dragging a border of your box. This grows your element from its pivot's location. Have a look at my guide or video on the anchors and pivot system if you want to learn more. Next, you will probably want a background to scale in size with your box. Add an image child element to the container and drag it to the top of the inner hierarchy of the container. It will show up beside the text, and that's normal. Attach a layout element to it and check to ignore the layout. Again, much more infos about this component can be found in my other tutorial or guide. Hold Shift and Alt, then click on the anchoring menu in the rect transform. Pick the setting at the bottom right corner to have your image stretch correctly in both directions. If you change the width of your container now, the background correctly resizes itself too. Just like with speech balloons in comics, text in UI needs empty space around it to breathe. You can do this by changing the padding value of the layout group. I typically start at 15 pixels all around and fine-tune in a later step. You now have a container with a background that resizes itself based on its text amount. If you need anything more complex, want to make it more robust, or generally want to understand the layout system a lot better, check out my guide and video on the topic linked here. Have a great week!